Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the participants joining us today for the webinar organized by National Medical Teachers Association India. I am Dr. Harsh. I will moderate today's session. Uh, we delighted to host the important discussion on adverse reaction in clinical trials. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Bhargav Purohit sir, a distinguished academician and seasoned pharmacologist, currently serving as an associate professor in Department of Pharmacology, Government Medical College, Bhavnagar. With over 23 years of teaching and academic experience, sir has significantly contributed to both undergraduate and postgraduate medical education. He completed his MBBS and MD in pharmacology from MP Shah Medical College, Jamnagar. An active researcher with over 22 publications, he also plays a pivotal role in academic governance, public speaking, and organizing workshops and symposiums. His key areas of interest include cardiovascular pharmacology, pharmacovigilance, rational use of antimicrobial medical education, and biostatistics. With a calm demeanor and tireless dedication, he is not only respected academician but also a beloved guide among his students. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. We will address during our question and answer segment. With this, I invited Dr. Bhargav Purohit sir to join his presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Harsh. Let us start with our today's session on adverse drug reaction in clinical trial. But before we start our new topic, let's pay our homage to those people who lost their life yesterday in a tragic plane crash at Ahmedabad. Nearly 300 innocent souls were taken far too soon. Mothers, fathers, children, friends, each leaving behind an irreplaceable void. So let us take a moment of silence to reflect, to pray for the peace for the departed, and for the strength for those who grieve. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. The safety of the people should be the highest law. Marcus Tullius Cicero says it. When I was preparing this slide 2 days ago, I was hardly aware that we will see such tragic incidents resonating with this statement too soon. Be it any sphere of life, including clinical research, safety of the people is of paramount importance. So, learning objectives of today's session. Participants should, at the end of the session, participants should be able to describe the various terminology in the context of various adverse events in clinical trial, describe methods of reporting, enumerate the conditions in which compensation is to be paid, and how the method of quantum of the compensation is calculated, and finally, role of insurance in compensation due to clinical trial related injury. Introduction. Clinical trials are not just about efficacy. Safety is equally critical. And carefully watch for safety issues. Why? Because a single missed or poorly reported adverse event can jeopardize a participant's safety, derail a trial, and even damage the public trust. So adverse reaction monitoring is both ethical obligations as well as a regulatory requirement. So first we will see various terminologies. Clinical trial. Clinical trial is any systematic study of a new drug or investigation of a new drug in human with the objective of studying its clinical, pharmacological or adverse effects with the objective of determining the safety, efficacy or tolerance of the such new drug or investigational new drug. Academic clinical trial, it is trial of an already approved drug, but it is for either new indications or new dose or new dosage form, and your ultimate objective is not the marketing approval. Adverse drug reactions. There are two definitions of adverse drug reactions. WHO defines adverse drug reactions as any harmful effect of the drug that is seen at usual doses. While in the context of clinical trials, harmful effect of the drug which is seen at any dose is considered adverse drug reaction. Adverse event is any untoward medical occurrence which may or may not be related to the drug. So when you are sure that it is adverse, that particular harmful event is because of drug, it is adverse drug reactions. When you are in doubt, it is adverse event. One more terminology which is used in the context of adverse reaction in the clinical trial is SUSAR. Suspected, unexpected, serious adverse reaction. Adverse reactions which is serious and unexpected, which is not mentioned in the information brochure or investigation brochure, but it has reasonable possibility of occurrence due to clinical trial drug, and that's why it is called suspected. So it has to be a serious adverse reaction, it has to be unexpected, and there should be reasonable possibility of its likelihood because of clinical trial drug. Serious ADRs. Serious ADRs are those which either result in death or they result in permanent disability, or those which produce fetal abnormality, or may result in hospitalization, or those which are life-threatening, or those which needed medical or surgical intervention to prevent any of the outcome mentioned above. These are called serious ADRs. If they happen, then report it within 24 hours. Classification of adverse event. They can be based on the severity. They can be mild, moderate, severe. Based on the seriousness, that can be serious or non-serious. Based on their likelihoodness, either they are expected if they are mentioned as per the investigational brochures, or unexpected if they are not mentioned in the investigator brochure. And another classification of adverse event is based on the causality: possible, probable, certain, etc. Now comes the issue of reporting adverse event. How to report? So under this we will study what to report, what is considered as injury in clinical trial, how to report, why to report everything, and timeline for reporting. Additionally, how the compensation is paid in the event of adverse reaction in clinical trial, and what is the role of insurance in the compensation. So what to report? Start the drug therapy, and if any new symptom, new sign, or any laboratory abnormality appears, then it is to be reported. So what is considered as clinical trial related injury? If it is because of adverse reaction of investigational new drug, or if it is protocol violation or scientific misconduct or negligence, if investigational new drug fails to produce the intended adverse effects, and because of that patients suffer injury. If as a part of the trial protocol placebo was administered and injury occurred because of that, and ADRs because of concomitant product administered as part of the clinical trial, they are considered as clinical trial related injury. So how to report adverse reaction? During routine clinical practice, CDSO has given a form. But during adverse reaction, during clinical trial, there is no fixed format, but few broad guidelines are given. For minor adverse reaction, they are to be submitted with CRF only. But if there are serious adverse events, then it should have two enclosures. One is description of the serious adverse event, and another is covering letter. Regulatory agency, they have given broad guidelines about the description of the adverse event, how to send description of the adverse event, serious adverse event. So this is the requirement which is set forth by the regulatory agency. Form can be designed by sponsor or investigator, but it should include following details. We will see in the next slide. First, participant detail, initial, age, gender, height, weight. Next, drug details, name of the drug, indication for which it was prescribed, formulation, dose, frequency of administration, starting the drug therapy and end of the therapy, and concomitant medications which were administered, including OTC drugs or herbal drugs. Now comes the important aspect of details of serious adverse reaction. Just like we mentioned ODP in medicine history, serious adverse events is to be described, like full description of the event, starting from the how it happens, how it started to how it ended, de-challenge and re-challenge information, outcome of the adverse event, and finally details about the investigators. This is the format of covering letter. Why to report everything, even if it seems irrelevant or unrelated to the drug? Because it generates a database which can be later classified. Moreover, a reaction which seems unrelated today, after some time, it may look relevant to the investigational product. All adverse events which are recorded by the investigator and they are assessed for causality, severity, seriousness, resolved or not, treatment required or not, and finally details about the de-challenge and re-challenge. How fast to report? Different timelines for serious and non-serious adverse reactions. Non-serious adverse reaction, they have to be filled with routinely along with the CRF, and they have to be submitted along with the CRF only. But serious adverse events, if they happen, then investigator has to report to the ethics committee, sponsor and DCGI. Initial report should be submitted within 24 hours only. But detailed report, there are certain timelines. Investigator and sponsor has to submit the detailed report within 14 days to the CDSCO, while ethics committee has to submit it within 30 days. If serious adverse events, it is associated with death, then an expert committee is set up. Expert committee, it submits its opinion and report within 60 days. And it determines the quantum of the compensation which is to be paid to the legal heir of the deceased within 90 days. And within 30 days of the issuing of the order, sponsor has to pay the payment. But if there is serious adverse events other than death, then committee sets up it within 60 days. Committee gives order within 60 days, and again sponsor has to make the payment within 30 days. These timelines are to be strictly adhered. Even if adverse reaction is not resolved, this report should be submitted within these timelines. Later on, future versions can be administered if newer things crop up. That was about reporting adverse event. Now comes the issue of compensation in clinical trial. So under this heading, we will see when the compensation is paid, how much is paid, who pays for the compensation, what are the other responsibility towards the participants, and what if sponsor does not fulfill his legal obligations to pay the compensation. Compensation in clinical trial. When compensation is paid, if death occurs during clinical trial, permanent disability occurs, hospitalization occurs, or if it is associated with teratogenic effect. In each scenario, quantum of compensation is calculated by different formulas. In case of death, compensation is calculated by this formula, BFR divided by 99.37, where B is base amount, which is 8 lakh rupees. If it is factor depending upon the age of the subject. If there is less age, then factor will be more and compensation will be correspondingly more. Like if age is 16 years or less, then factor will be 228.54. But if age is 65 years or more, then factor is less. So compensation will be correspondingly less. Finally, risk factor of the patient. If he was terminally ill patient with expected survival not more than 6 months, then it is least. Risk factor is least 0.5. While if he was a healthy volunteer or subject with absolutely no risk, then risk factor will be more. So if we combine this together, this formula, it means if participant is a young, healthy subject, then compensation will be naturally more. Like for COVID clinical trial or any clinical vaccine clinical trial, if it is to be administered to a young participant without any risk, then in case of clinical trial injury, compensation will be more. But if you are conducting a clinical trial on stage 4 bronchogenic carcinoma in elderly patient more than 65 years of age, then naturally there will be compensation will be less. Minimum amount that is prescribed is 2 lakh rupees, whose expected mortality is 90% or more within 30 days. Otherwise, it is 4 lakh rupees. Maximum compensation which is to be paid and as per this formula is 73.6 lakh rupees. Second scenario is serious adverse event causing permanent disability. Here compensation is calculated by this formula. CD into 90 divided by 10,000. C is compensation in case of death. What will the compensation had the participant been died? It is multiplied by the percentage of the disability. Say for example, if compensation in case of death turns out to be 50 lakh rupees and disability is 30%, then 50 into 30 into 90. So that makes up divided by 10,000. So that makes up around 13.5 lakh rupees. Next comes the serious adverse events causing birth defect. So birth defect, it encompasses 4 conditions. If stillbirth occurs, premature death occurs, irreversible abnormality occur, or reversible abnormality occur. Compensation in such condition should be such, it should be a lump sum amount, which if it is kept like a fixed deposit, then it will attract the half the minimum wage of the unskilled worker of the Delhi. So compensation in this condition, it is half as compared to death, and medical management as long as required, free medical management as long as required in case of reversible and irreversible abnormalities. In case of serious adverse event causing life-threatening disease, compensation is calculated by this formula, 2WN. W stands for the per day wage of the unskilled worker in New Delhi, which is revised from time to time, and number of days of the hospitalization. Compensation, it should be recommended by ethics committee to the investigator and CDCO based on the guidelines, but final call is taken by regulating agency. For all the clinical trial related injury, free medical management should be given as long as required or till such a time it is proved that injury is not related to the clinical trial, whichever is earlier. So who pays for the compensation? For regulatory clinical trial, sponsor. Usually it is paid through insurance. And in investigator-initiated trial, investigator or institution through the corpus pays the compensation. So it is responsibility of the host institution to provide compensation and cover for the insurance for research-related injury or harm to be paid as decided by the ethics committee. Sometimes research projects, they are funded by research agencies, nodal agencies like ICMR and everything. In this condition, it is advisable to take insurance and make the separate budget provisions for premium of that insurance. What if sponsor does not provide medical treatment or compensation? In that condition, his clinical trial can be suspended or cancelled. Sponsors can be debarred from conducting the new clinical trial or any other actions deemed fit. Last comes the issue of insurance in clinical trial related injury. Legally, it is not binding to take insurance, but it is binding to pay compensation for any clinical trial related injury. But sponsors usually take it. Sometimes ethics committee demand insurance. Without insurance cover, they will not permit the ethics committee, clinical trial. It adds to the authenticity and it boosts participant confidence in the sponsor. Usually, insurances for 1 to 3 years. What insurance covers? Basically, clinical trial insurance is a contract between a sponsor and insurance company that covers medical expenses and legal expenses which may arise from clinical trial. Ambit of insurance. What insurance typically covers? It covers clinical trial related injury or death. It covers congenital inability due to new drugs, trial drugs, cost of the medical treatment, and legal liabilities to third parties. What it does not cover? It does not cover medical insurance, negligence, and injury due to unrelated causes. Premium of the insurance, it depends upon various factors like type of the drug device that is being tested, phase of the clinical trial, risk profile. If your study participants, they are high risk participants like heart failure or during acute myocardial infarction, then risk profile is more. If the drug is anti-cancer drug which can produce where failure of the therapy can have devastating consequences, then premium will be more. Number of sites and participants, more the participants, more will be the premium. And liability limits, the total liability for one claim or aggregate liability of all the participants. With every claim, there are certain deductibles. Deductibles is an amount that will be deducted for each and every claim that should be borne by the investigator. Say, for example, one participant developed clinical trial related injury and now he has to be paid a compensation of 13 lakh rupees. But insurance companies will not pay all 13 lakh rupees. They will they will deduct some amount of processing fee and everything. Like say for example, 1 lakh rupees for processing fee or other legal fees. Then who will make up for that 1 lakh rupees? Study budget or fund should be available to bear for the deductible cost. So, which are the common issues in clinical trial insurance? Delayed claim processing due to lack of documentation, exclusion clauses not understood by the site investigators, misconduct occurs if there is any miscommunication between various stakeholders, or there are coverage gap for protocol violations or off-label use. These are some companies which offer insurance for clinical trial related injuries. These are some resources for better understand the insurance in clinical trial related injuries. To summarize, participant safety monitoring and compensation in case of clinical trial injury, they are non-negotiable. Adverse events should be reported in a timely manner. When to pay compensation and how much is to be paid is objectively defined. An insurance policy can be a good firewall for the both participant and sponsor, but it should be carefully studied. In clinical trials, smallest oversight can become biggest regret. Document well, report early, and protect always. Those who try to harm others, they usually end up harming themselves. These are the resources that I have used for preparing the presentation. These are the acknowledgement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of NMT and the entire organizing team, I, Dr. Rohan, extend heartfelt thanks to Dr. Bhargav Purohit, sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, any questions?
Hello.
Okay, any questions?
Hello. Hello.
Yes, any questions?
Sir, I guess there are no questions for now. Okay, so we conclude our today's session. On behalf of NMT and the entire organizing team, I, Dr. Rohan, extend heartfelt thanks to Dr. Bhargav M. Purohit, sir, for sharing such a detailed and practical perspective on adverse reactions on clinical trials. I would like to also thank our founder and coordinator, Dr. Arvind Singh Panwar, sir, whose vision of creating NMTA brought us together today. I also thank to all the participants for making this session interactive. Wishing you all a peaceful and productive weekend ahead. Thank you, everyone.